Though I think sometimes they say that's not really the accurate term anymore. But we've learned a lot. He led the Wednesday webinar last week on strategic foresight practices. And Halson, just so great to welcome you on board as a colleague in this endeavor.
Thank you. I'm excited to learn from other folks. There's always fascinating topics on Wednesday webinars, so I'm glad that I can be more involved and yeah, just share what great work other folks are doing.
Exactly. Well, I want to get right away to our guest today. Steve Stoller is the Director of Media Relations it for the City of Plano, Texas, one of the great suburbs in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and one of the well-known suburbs across the world, and such an innovative city. And I have had the privilege of knowing Steve for, I guess, ever since he came to work at the City of Plano 11 years ago in that regard. But previous to that, he was a reporter for over 3 decades for two different stations here in Dallas, and I saw his face and saw some of those stories. So I have really enjoyed getting to know him. And, he's talking today about media relations in cities. I think it's such an important issue. A lot of times when I'm doing city council retreats around the country, as we're preparing for it, somebody will say, well, the media will be there, almost like that's a negative thing. But I would suggest to you that we need the media, and that far from having an adversarial relationship with them, we need to have a collaborative relationship with them. And Steve's going to talk about that more. He'll maybe say a little bit more about his background and his biography. But Steve, welcome. We're so appreciative of you taking time to do this webinar. And we want to talk a little bit more about the future at the end. But for right now, let me just turn it over to you and share with us from your experience what we need to know about media relations and local government.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And Howson, pleasure meeting you. And it's great to be on this webinar today, and I'm very, very excited about it. So let me tell you a little bit more about me. As Mike mentioned, I spent 34 years in broadcast journalism, working in some pretty unattractive places. Started off my career in Macon, Georgia, worked there for about a year and a half. Then I got a job in Kearney, Nebraska, which was the coldest winter I've ever spent in my entire life. We had blizzards, wind chills, 75 degrees below zero. So I sent out a bunch of resumes and I ended up getting a job in Asheville, North Carolina. Was there for 3.5 years. Then I went from there to Texas. I worked in El Paso for a year, and then I landed my dream job in a major market in Dallas. And I ended up spending 17 years at what was formerly the CBS affiliate in Dallas. It was bought by a Fox and it became a Fox affiliate, KDFW. And then I was hired by the competition, WFAA, which had the reputation of being one of the best TV stations in the country in Dallas. And I spent 11 years there. Then I covered Collin County, which is north of Dallas, and Plano was one of the towns in Collin County. And I got to know everybody at the city. I interviewed the city manager, the executive team, the directors, and the city manager is the former police chief, who I forged a very good relationship with. And he offered me a position. He created a media relations department, the first one in the history of Plano, and made me the director. So the cool thing about it is I came in and I could really shape this department the way I saw fit that would help the city the most. So as a reporter, I always considered myself a storyteller. And with technology and all the advancements with video and smartphone technology, it's funny, but it seems like storytelling is becoming a dying art of people who just use their words to create images and to tell compelling stories. So you'll probably hear a few of my stories today, and I will show you one story that has some visuals. It's a television news story, but a lot of it will just be words and creating images. One thing I really want to stress today and Mike mentioned this as well, the local news media is not your enemy. They can be your friend and partner in getting your positive messages out about your city and really sharing your stories as a city, county, or entity. You know, when I started my job at the City of Plano 11 years ago, I had this huge obstacle to overcome. The first time I did media training, I met with the executive team, more than 30 directors. And my first question, what is your impression of the news media? If you have a negative impression, raise your hand. Almost every single hand in the room went up. And you know, it was interesting, but my first day on the job was 3 days after I left my television news career. And we had this huge ice storm. It was called Ice Mageddon. A lot of times in North Texas, we don't have snow, we have ice, and everything gets blanketed with a sheet of ice. The roads, tree branches get the ice, they get heavy, they fall, trees come down, power lines come down. It was a major disaster for North Texas. So I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was one image where the ice started melting at an apartment complex, and this huge sheet of ice slid off the roof right onto a sports car and demolished the sports car. It was totaled. It was about 15 seconds of video. And not only did that image go around the United States, but it was international. They showed it in London, they showed it in Sweden. So a few days later, when things began to return to normal very, very slowly, uh, they decided to honor and show their appreciation to all the power crews, the linemen that came in from all over the Southwest to restore power to much of the city. They decided to have a breakfast at the convention center here. So I was in the meeting with the city management team. They were talking about this. And I said, you know, has anyone thought about maybe contacting the media about this breakfast? And they all looked at each other. And then they looked at me and they said, no. And I said, what an incredible opportunity. You know, I said, I guarantee it, if we let the media know about this breakfast, every single television station will be there and be there live in the morning. So the city manager said, well, Steve, that's why we hired you. So we did that. We told the media, everybody was there, and it was a great story. It was a great story, and it really got our message out that we really wanted to show appreciation to these guys that came in from all over the place to restore our power. So let's see. One thing when I do media training that I always tell the people who attend is that, like so many things and so many different levels, media relations is all about establishing and building relationships with people. You know, and story ideas is one way to do it. Now, I want you to imagine for a second being a television news reporter, or even a print reporter for a newspaper. Every morning, there's an editorial meeting. And the reporters, this is what a lot of people don't realize about news coverage. People think that you just drive around waiting for news to happen. It's not like that at all. You come to this morning editorial meeting armed with story ideas. And the meeting is comprised of other reporters, the management team, which is usually the news director, the executive producer, the managing editor, the assignment editor, and the producers of each individual newscast. So the reporters have to have story ideas in these meetings every day. I got to tell you, as a reporter who did this for decades, there are those days that you go through all your email, you go through your sources, you've made telephone calls, and you still have nothing, no story ideas at all. Now, you can't go to this editorial meeting without a story idea. That's unacceptable. That's the most pressure and anxiety you have as a reporter. Now, that's where you, as a government entity, come in, because if you give these people story ideas, they will love you because you're giving them something to go into that meeting with that they can pitch. Even if it's an idea that they'll never pursue, that they'll never do a story on, they'll have a great appreciation for you giving them an idea. Now, the other side of the coin, if it's a good idea, if it's an interesting story, or a word we use a lot in television news is compelling, if it's a compelling story, they'll probably end up doing a story on it. And if they do, you're usually giving them very positive things about the city. It's a win for you, and they're getting a good story out of it. It's a win for them. And I will give you an example. Our community services manager calls me up and she said, Steve, it's the anniversary of our CDBG grants, Community Development Block Grants. And the total that we've given out over a certain period of years was really a few $1 million that we got from the federal government. And it put a lot of people into their first homes ever. So I go, oh boy, there's an exciting topic. I said, do you have anybody who got one of these grants that might be willing to talk to the news media? She said, well, we reached out to several people, but nobody wants to be on the news. Nobody wants to be on camera. I said, well, if you find somebody, let me know, because that's how the news media is going to tell the story. They're not just going to do something on grants that people got. That's boring. You have to show a compelling story of somebody that got into a house because they got this money from the government. So weeks later, she calls me back and she says, I want to show you a video. It's a cell phone video. It's probably 20 seconds long. It's a mom who got a CDBG grant walking into a house that she bought with her two young daughters who don't know at that point that that is their new first home. So she rolls her tape. She says, girls, guess what? This is our new house. They were jumping up and down with joy. Mommy, 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 this is our house. So I called our manager, our community services manager back, and I said, you found gold. This is beautiful. This is the way to tell the story. So I had that on my desk because I knew that at some point, a local television news reporter was going to call me up and say, Stoller, I got nothing to pitch today. And sure enough, it was one of the reporters from the CBS affiliate. And he goes, hey, what do you got? I have nothing. And I said, well, it's a story about how many CDBG grants we've been out. I said, but before you yawn, let me send you this video. Look at the video and call me back. So he said, okay. He didn't sound too excited. So he watches the video. He calls me right back. Oh my God, this is a great story. I love it. It's going to be our lead story at 10 o'clock. I said, really? He said, is the woman and the kids, are they available? I said, yeah, we've already worked it out. I'll give you their phone number. They're willing to talk to you. I said, our community services manager, she can go on camera. She can tell you about the program, how it's helped these specific people and other people in our community. Even though it was weeks after the actual anniversary of the program and weeks after I got the original idea, it was the lead story on the CBS affiliate in the Dallas market at 10 o'clock. And it was a wonderful story. That little 20-second video, they used what's called a cold open. When they started their newscast, they used the video from that. And then when they threw it to the reporter, they probably showed that video another 2 times during the course of the story. So it just goes to show that, if you have something and there's a compelling and interesting way to tell the story, it's going to be a great story. And like I said, it's a win-win for you and for the TV entity. So other ways that we build relationships is, I have an advantage because I came from the profession. I was a TV journalist for so many years. And the people that I deal with know that. And they know that I respect them. We have a mutual relationship that's based on trust, respect, honesty. They know if there's something negative and I can't talk about it, and the city attorney has said, hey, we could have litigation over this situation. Can't go on camera. Well, I can go on camera and tell them that. And that's giving them something. Even when you can't go on and the attorney's saying don't, you can say the reason why you can't go on camera. You're still giving them something to use and a legitimate reason why you can't go into detail about whatever topic it is. So here's another thing. I meet with some of the print reporters on really every few weeks. We meet at a little coffee shop in downtown Plano, and we talk about the things that are happening in the city. And without exception, usually two or three stories, articles in the newspaper will originate with that conversation over coffee. We also have, we've done it a few times, breakfast with the city manager. We'll bring in some food and some coffee, no cameras. We just want to build those relationships. And the city manager will talk to the reporters about what's happening in the city. And it's just an open conversation. They can ask any questions they want. And usually there's story ideas that are born from that meeting as well. Now, here's another one that happened. And this is really an example of something negative happening and being just honest and transparent. At the beginning of COVID, um, the city manager came out with an edict that if people didn't pay their water bills, no one's water was going to be shut off in a pandemic. Usually, our policy is two water bills for non payment. You get a tag put on your door. It gives you a date and says, if you don't pay your bills, your responsibility by this given date, we have no choice but to shut your water off. City manager said, we're in a unique situation. We're in a pandemic. No one is going to get their water turned off. Unfortunately, that didn't filter down to the employees that work in the field that put the tags on the door. So 1,300 people got tags that their water was going to be turned off. So, in these situations, instead of coming to the city, they go to the media. So several people contacted the consumer reporter at the Fox affiliate, and they said the city of Plano is threatening to turn our water off. Consumer reporter calls me, I want to come interview you about what happened. So he did the interview with me, and I go, listen, we're in a pandemic. This is uncharted territory. We've never been through anything like this before. Things are going to fall through the cracks. Mistakes are going to be made. I said, the truth of the matter is, we're never going to turn anybody's water off. But a mistake was made. It was a communications gap. It didn't filter down to the guys putting the tags on the door. As soon as we found out about it, we corrected it. We got word out through the media, through our customer and utility services department, which notified residents, no one's water is going to be turned off. We made a mistake. It wasn't going to end up in a court of law, And I think by just being honest about it, I think that was the best approach to take. And I think in terms of our residents and television viewers, I think there was an appreciation and respect for, what, we screwed up here. We made a mistake, but we learned from it. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen again, and we address it as quickly as possible. The next day, I get a text from Steve Noviello, the consumer reporter, and I kept it. And when I do media training, I always read his text. It said, Steve, it was refreshing to interview someone representing a city who said, it wasn't our finest day. We made a mistake, we corrected it, and we learned from it, and now we're moving forward. And the fact that that came from a consumer reporter at a major TV station, a major market, it meant so much to me. I mean, think about that. That's something that he was not familiar with hearing. A city that was just honest about making a simple mistake that could have affected a lot of people, but it was corrected and we're moving on. So that was really important. So before we open this to questions, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, I want to share my screen and I want to show you a story. Another question I ask at media training is, how many of you think that an employee's retirement can be a compelling, interesting, and legitimate news story? Well, when I ask that question, most people say, a retirement? A news story? I don't think so. So one of my colleagues that I used to work with at WFAA in Dallas, we told him about this retirement. This woman had been a 911 dispatcher for 30 years. And he did this story that I want to share my screen and show you now.
Years, Debbie Pandaroo served the people of Plano. She was the voice on the other end of 911 dispatch calls until last week. News 8's Jobin Paniker has the story.
Copy that. Clear for one service.
Some calls are harder than others.
3 out of 5. Copy of disturbance.
This one especially. On a cold January night in Plano.
It will help the adrenaline, hopefully.
But there is one person who knows.
It's going to take some time.
Debbie decided tonight, in her home complete with 4 walls of Mexican art, to pick up crocheting again after 20 years.
Copy tag. David Jeepler Frank.
This was her escape when she needed it.
Park west of Jupiter, Arkansas tag. Precinct Airport.
9199 has 2 related.
Debbie is a dispatcher for as long as Plano has had 911.
Now, when people ask my mom what I do, she says she tells the cops where to go.
On this night, there is a pen and paper ready for her.
And I haven't written anything down.
The last words for her last call.
The end of an era.
30 years, straightforward, no nonsense, a job she took behind the scenes, thankless at times.
So I'm trying not to be emotional. I'm fighting that.
A job Debbie admits she tried to quit.
3 times, seriously.
Most folded under pressure, emotionally drained by these calls. But Debbie kept coming back for her night shift, for the people, for the officers.
I mean, to just keep and say, hey, this is Debbie. See ya. I don't think that's right.
A person who made a living communicating was now at a loss for words.
It's going to be a difficult thing for me. I mean, you see hardened stuff all the time, but when you see somebody do 30 years in this job, that's really something.
To all my men and women in uniform out there.
After 30 years, it has come time for me to hang up my headset.
Words that took 30 years to make perfect.
End of broadcast.
I almost cracked, but I held it together.
Some calls require many to respond.
Now I'm gonna cry.
One moment she'll remember forever. More than a voice over radio.
Thank you to all of you for putting up with me and making me proud to be something. Because I was very proud to serve all of you.
A week into retirement, Debbie is still a night owl.
Sometimes I would forget what day it was.
She now has some crocheting to do. Her annual trip to Mexico to plan. She can also spend some time with her mother.
I'm just going to kind of play it by ear. See what happens.
But mostly, enjoy the calm. Jobin Paniker, Channel 8 News.
It's a tough job, especially for 30 years, so congratulations.
I hope you enjoyed that. Jobin Paniker is probably one of the best storytellers in the Dallas market. He's excellent. And by the way, anything but a regular retirement, won an Emmy for that story. So pretty incredible. You know, most people would think a retirement wouldn't be an Emmy award-winning news story, but it was. But that just goes to show you that with a little creativity, so many things can be news stories. And I find that a lot of my fellow directors here at the city, sometimes there will be a great story right under their nose and they still don't recognize it. So that's been a mission of mine personally for the last 11 years, is to try to change their perception about the media and look at them as a friend who can help us, not somebody who's out to get us or hurt us in any way. So, Mike, I'm going to throw it back to you for some Q&A.
Okay, wow, thank you, Steve. That was so good, and man, I'm really impressed, and I'm kind of taken back because I work with some of those 911 folks, and their jobs. We talk about firefighters and policemen being first responders, but the operators and 911 operators are really the first responders. And what a great story. So we got several questions. I want to ask one is, what would you recommend a city do if they don't have someone like in your position that's full-time, kind of dedicated to this? How would a city respond if they didn't have that position?
Well, you know, a lot of the different entities of the city have people that are responsible for maybe communications, marketing, public relations, A lot of the police departments and fire departments have their own people. Like
Mhm.
here in Plano, they have a public information officer for both police and fire. And I always offer them support any way they need it, but they're really autonomous and they enjoy that autonomy.
Mhm.
No one knows what they do better than someone who's within their department. But, I would say that if you don't have anyone, who is the most logical person that can act as a spokesperson for the city? And again, it's all about building relationships. If you're in a smaller town with one newspaper, you know, get to know the reporters.
Mhm.
Let them know that you're a partner, that you're not an adversary. When you have an idea of something that's happening in the city, call the reporter and let them know about it. You got to build that relationship and establish it. And the thing is, when you have these relationships, and this is really important to know, is when something bad or negative does happen, I really believe within me that you get a fair shake when you have the relationship. And that's all you can ask for. You know, if you have that relationship, you have that trust, you have that respect, they're going to listen to you when something bad happens. And
Mhm.
you will get an opportunity to tell your side of the story.
That's so important. I was doing a council retreat one time. I won't go into the place, but there was a feeling with the council and maybe with the staff that the local newspaper had been very negative about the city, and there was a sense of negativity in the air. And they had this they had a reporter at the council retreat, and in the course of discussion, one of the council members just started addressing this reporter and saying it's got to start with you, and very aggressive and condescending. And surprise, surprise, the story that came out about that retreat was not so good.
Yeah.
And I know the intention of the person's heart when he was saying that, but boy, it came across so adversarial. So here's a question I have for you. What if there's been bad blood? What if we've got bad blood? Taylor Swift song. Now we got bad blood. What do we do from there to start rebuilding?
Well, there's no substitute for good communication. you know. I think you get some people from the city together, you maybe call the editor of the newspaper, publisher, and have a little powwow where everybody gets together to talk, to communicate, to get to know one another better, you know. And I'm sure in most cases the media is going to say, hey, we're not out to get you. We're just reporting the facts. But from your perspective, you want to get the good stuff out too, which is significant to the residents that live in your city. And as a journalistic entity, I would think that they have the responsibility to tell those stories as well. They're not just looking for negative things,
Mhm.
but it's got to start somewhere, and it always starts with better communication,
Yeah.
getting to know one another, getting to know what your goals are, how you want to do things, that you have the desire to improve the relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that's the starting point.
I think it's what you're talking about is what we talk about with servant leadership. That all legitimate leadership is this, sort of tension between, on the one hand, healthy relationships. On the other hand, I have to get something done. So, well, I want to treat people with empathy, I want to listen to them. I want to help them feel like I care about them legitimately. So that that's a part of servant leadership. And I think most people in local government really do their best at that. I don't mean that critical. It's just we need to be able to see it as this is an expression of who we are, not like we're getting out of our role by treating the media with dignity and honor and respect, because you're not. You're just carrying on who you are. And we got a couple of nuts and bolts questions I want to get to. Here's one. Is it your practice to send multiple press releases about an upcoming event for the city, um, uh, with a different aspect of the event? Each time it's a little different aspect of the event, or do you send one? How do you handle that?
Usually I just send one. And the press releases, a lot of times when I was a reporter and press releases used to be sent to me, I would probably read the headline and the first sentence and never get past that. So it's so important when you put the press release out that that headline says it all or really says something that attracts them to read more about what's happening. It's so easy just to file it in a garbage can or now just delete it. But then if it's something that I really think that is going to be in their best interest to cover beyond that, I'll follow up with a personal email to each one. Hey, did you get my press release? This is happening on this day, and this is maybe something in addition to the press release or a deeper reason why they need to be there. Something that might be said if it's a press conference, some little addition to the information in the press release, a
Yeah.
tidbit that tries to uh, raise their interest in coming.
That's very helpful. So what I heard is get Chat GPT to help you write that headline to catch that reporter's attention, right? So another question is there an ideal day or time to pitch a story that increases the chance of it being used?
Absolutely. So it depends. Those editorial meetings are usually 9, 10 o'clock at the latest. So the earlier you get your idea in, or you could do it the day before. A lot of times, if you know a reporter and the reporter has the beat of covering your government, your city, you can call them up the day before and hey, we got something going on tomorrow I wanted to let you know about. Or at our council meeting tomorrow night, they're going to discuss this issue. They're talking about an ordinance for short-term rentals in our city. Very high interest story. Then you give them tips. So when they have their editorial meeting in the morning, it's like, hey, the City of Plano is going to have a council meeting tonight on short-term rentals. And if it's a television entity, they may do a story for the early news. This is what the City Council in Plano is going to talk about tonight, and do what we call in the business an advancer, a story in advance of the meeting. Here are the issues. And then they'll send somebody else to do a story for the late news who's actually covering the meeting and what happens at the meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, if you can get it in, I would say between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning. And if you can get it to the reporter, they're going to bring that idea into that meeting. Or the assignment editors are usually there early, and they come to the meeting and they go down the list of everything that they know about at the meeting. And then the producers, the management team, everybody makes a decision. What are the most important stories that we need to cover today?
Super. So another question, how would you recommend that someone on the city staff stay engaged with a media person in between story pitches without coming across as pushy?
Yeah. Well, it's almost like the guys that I deal with the local newspapers who cover Plano. It's really like we've become friends. Because when we get together for coffee, we joke around, we share stories, we talk about our families, our vacations, and then we talk about what's happening in the city. They tell me stories that they're working on, that they're interested in. I suggest things. Hey, have you done anything recently about this huge development where they're turning our old mall into a big, like, multi-purpose community with everything from a park to residential, uh, stores, restaurants, and they're building it. And, like recently, they said, yeah, we'd really like to take a tour of the construction site and show people what they've been doing. First thing they did is they built like this 1900 parking space underground garage. So the developer and our director of special projects took them into the garage. It's complete now, and gave them a tour. So the public got to see firsthand the first major completion of this big, huge construction project that's going to be a jewel when it's done in our city.
Yeah. I'm excited. I know that.
Yeah, every time I have coffee with them, and usually we have coffee like every 2 weeks or so, without failure, they always end up getting 2 or 3 ideas from that conversation. And then I'll read the paper. It's like, man, we talked about that last week.
Yeah. Okay, so you touched on something that I hear this come up a lot. You're having coffee with them. One of the things I hear people are afraid of is that they're going to say something to a reporter that gets taken out of context, or manipulated so that, what they say is, what would you, how would you respond to someone that says that that's a concern to them?
Well, I've seen that happen before. I've been misquoted before by people. I think the most important thing is trust. You build that trust with people, and but you have to be so very careful in what you say. I've seen where people have said specifically off the record, and the reporter agrees to that, and then something gets published or said even after that agreement. So you really have to have a very, very high level of trust and just be on guard about what you say.
Hmm.
If you say something that you think is going to get you in trouble, don't say it. Don't say it.
Yeah.
Just know, even if you consider the person a friend, they're still a journalist first. The majority of people that I deal with, I know that I can trust them. I know that there's certain pieces of information that I tell them off the record, it's going to be off the record, and they're not going to come back and double cross me by publishing anything. But if I have any iota of doubt, I won't go there. So
Yeah.
you have to be absolutely sure that it is a solid bond of trust that will not be violated.
I had a mentor that used to teach me that if you preface something by saying, I probably shouldn't say this, but don't. That's that's pretty much it. So, well, Steve, this has been great. I really appreciate it. I think it's such a crucial issue because we need clear and open reporting. The media, as you said, I totally agree with. They are not our enemy. They have a job to do. We shouldn't make that job hard. We should think very carefully about what life would be like if we didn't have a free media. And that's not a good scenario at all. So, really being able to teach cities how to engage more positively with the media, I think, is a big step forward. And I want to just say, uh, our future with Steve is really just starting because while he's worked for 11 years for the city of Plano, come July 31st, he'll be retiring and moving to Florida. So we're all a little bit jealous of that, but he has also agreed to become a facilitator with SGR and working with local governments all over the country to help them, doing workshops to help them know how to do engagement with the media in a more positive way. And as great as your contributions have been to the city of Plano, and certainly before that, those decades as a reporter, I think you're going to build on that and be helping cities, and just couldn't be more excited for us, for you, and especially for cities on this, Steve. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with me. We'll be working something out. Halson, before we close, I want to ask you, what you've been listening to all this. What's your takeaway from this webinar and what you've heard Steve talk about?
Wow, this was incredible. I think the biggest kind of I think assumption that I had flipped for me here was that reporters have this flow of stories and that local governments would be competing for that when it seems like they're always needing new stories, right? And I think it's really challenge it can be hard to tell, like, hold space for local governments and time to tell what the good that's happening, right? So actually it sounds like reporters need all the stories that they can get, and there can be a really helpful partnership between local government and media. So, yeah, thank you, Steve. This was great.
Yes, it
Thank
was.
you.
And I see there in our chat comments a message from Carol with the Plano ISD. And I think that's one of the highest tributes to anybody. You helped them with some of their stories from the ISD, and that's just the example of great servant leadership. So thank you for your work there, Steve, and so look forward to working with you down the road.
Me too, Mike. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited about this opportunity working with SGR. I love to do it. You know, I love helping cities learn how to deal with the media. And I look forward to having that long relationship with you guys.
That's super. Well, thank you everyone that's been you've been tuned in. Thank you, Lisa, for all your work behind the scenes. And we look forward to seeing you next week. We'll have Micah Gaudet talking about AI and budgeting. And I know we're all interested in the budget process. Some of you are in the pains of that right now. And you know what? There's some help. And Micah is going to talk about that. So hope you'll join us for that. And we'll see you down the road.